The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we ask the question, what patterns is your business addicted to that are toxic? Let us help you with some business rehab. All right, I'm Stephen Sakach here again with Tullio Siragusa and Ash Maher. Hey guys. All right, gentlemen, it's business intervention time. People out there have businesses that are addicted to some toxic habits. It's hard not to be when I think some of the underlying foundations of how we structure, grow, and lead businesses are using models that kind of cause the problems. So honestly, this is probably an episode where we could probably do multiple shows, I'd imagine, just because there's a lot. This is fertile ground here. Our listeners probably come up with some great ideas as well, but let's dive in with some of ours. Tullio, what comes to mind when you think of business addictions that need an intervention?
So this is probably the biggest pattern, habit, business addiction that's out there, and that's addiction to short-term profits. Really, just the constant focus on quarterly earnings, cost-cutting measures, often harming quality, neglecting long-term investments like R&D, or just throwing R&D completely out the window, employee development, forget about it, and then ultimately, the symptoms is customer relationships suffer from this too.
So let's talk about those impacts, Tullio. So you mentioned customer relationships there. What other impacts does this have on a business?
Well, the thing is, the employees end up feeling the brunt of this, right? Because there's tremendous pressure for everyone to produce a lot more and a lot faster, right? So you end up with a lot of burnout. This also impacts customer loyalty because customers can feel when the focus is not on them, it's on profits. And also you end up using market relevance, right? If it's just a bad combination, you got burnt out employees, so they're not giving their best. Innovation's gone out the window because there's no R&D, there's nothing invested in there. And customers starting to feel sort of like this desire that they're just a number that they want to achieve, right? So it's just that combination has a very negative impact on the business.
Tullio, it's funny. I have an example story where I saw this happen in real time, where us as a team, we were having a hard time meeting demands, but they always still prioritized new business. And we're thinking to ourselves, oh my goodness, we're already struggling to meet that. But because of the short-term profits that would come from signing and closing another deal, all of that was thrown out the wayside. So I saw it infrastructurally hurt the entire organization when everybody, to your point, was burnt out. Everyone had an attitude. No one was happy because no one benefited from the new business except for the people at the top who had the biggest smiles on their faces, knowing we just had a conversation. Struggling.
I think the boss is thinking there is all, yes, they're doing more, they're doing it faster. Yeah, they're working extra hard and whatever, but then it's like
taking all the money.
At what cost, right?
We have to train some new employees now. The ones that
I think we're going to cover the hyper growth, addiction probably in a future episode. But that's another one. That's a whole nother one too. Just grow for the sake of growth.
Question: So, what are the root causes of this?
Well, I think the biggest cause is this fear of market volatility, but primarily is shareholder pressure. Now, at a deeper level, what the real cause is, it's probably the biggest epidemic that exists in the world today, which is people-pleasing disease, right? Yeah. We know what that looks like, is this desire to always be pleasing everybody. This is the business version of the people-pleasing disease.
But just one group of people.
One group of people. Shareholder, right? It's like, as long as we're pleasing the shareholders, we're good, So that's part of the the addiction is this needing to please the shareholders and the market analysts and to be ahead of the competitive landscape. It becomes its own thing for the sake of its own thing, right? And that's what makes it a pattern, a toxic pattern, because there's this fear of instability, the desire to maximize shareholder value quickly, and that's at the cost of any long-term vision or sacrificing long-term vision, or even the benefit that would come from things like R&D and investing in people, et cetera. That doesn't matter. It's like, as long as we make them happen for this quarter. But there's a big problem with that.
So if this is an addiction, what's the rehab strategy here, Tullio?
Well, it's a bad pattern in an addiction because it only thinks about right now, and it doesn't think about the fact that 3 quarters from now you will reach the right now 3 quarters from now. So you're constantly putting out fires because you're just focusing on the right now with no thought about the future. So it's a mind shift to realize that you can achieve short-term success by focusing on the long term.
Yeah.
Right? Because 3 quarters from now will be the immediate quarter, right? But without doing that, you're always putting out fires. So there needs to be a shift in mindset to long-term planning. In some cases, you're going to have to retrain and retool the staff, the executive team, and think about long-term planning. Think about the business being in business 5 years from now, 50 years from now. Stop thinking about just satisfying a small group of people instantly, because ultimately that's not sustainable. It just isn't. Long-term strategy, long-term planning, long-term tactics, reinvesting in people, making sure you invest in R&D, innovation. These things contribute to what will become a successful short-term quarter in the future. So shifting to that might require a few quarters and a few adjustments, but it's absolutely doable. And I've seen companies do it. I actually worked for a company by the name of Axiom years ago that changed its direction in the marketplace. They went from quarterly to a year-long guidance. And it was a big shock to Wall Street. It's like, what do you mean you're not giving us quarterly guidance? I think it was Axiom. I apologize if I'm not remembering correctly, but it was a shift from thinking short term to planning long term. Ultimately, it's saying, hey, if you're investing in us because we're going to be here a year from now, 2 years from now. We're doing all the right things. Judge us what we do for the entire year, not just on a quarterly basis. And so more of that needs to happen. I think, and because just like people pleasing, the only way to break that is to just stop. It's like we're gonna stop pleasing you. We're gonna tell you how this works, which ultimately benefits the shareholders too. So educating them on why that benefits them is key to this as well.
I think more of this will happen because, like, when we look at consciousness, rising and evolving, and we look at the businesses that are leading the way here with that evolved consciousness. This is one of the things that they do is they shift away from that short-term view and look, hey, we're in this for the long haul. We're in this for, like you said, 10 years, 15 years. And, they're obviously still very competitive, but they're just methodical as heck with their focus long-term. And you don't get all these, hey, we got to do this mass firing for, to make our quarterly numbers here, and all this stuff that's just really based on maybe even someone's stock options or something coming up, or some incentive goal that had to be reached by such and such date, which is, like we're saying, quarter over quarter, very short term versus like 5 years.
It's also not natural. I mean, think about farming, right? During the farming, the agricultural age, before the industrial age started, everything was based on having a good crop and treating the land in such a way that it can continue to produce good crops every year. So there's also ways to be completely abusive to the land and extrapolate maximum value out of a plot of land to the point where it doesn't produce anything the following year. It can happen. So farmers knew you have to respect the land, and you've got to treat it where it produces goods ongoing forever. So you don't want to, over plant, over everything just to get the biggest crop possible for that year. Because the following year, you might starve to death, right? So, that's natural. That's how nature works. You work with it. You don't take advantage of it too far where then you have nothing to work with. So in businesses, it's like, stop thinking about getting everything you can out of it right now, because you might have nothing to get out of it next year. So it's a mindset of long-term sustainability versus, I don't know, I just got to get it done this quarter, meet my bonus, and then we'll figure it out next quarter. That's just crazy. That's addiction.
The farming analogy reminded me. This is my daughter-in-law's thesis. She's working on is it's that soil. She's a soil scientist, so it's that particular issue with the soil that they're having. So definitely, and some different techniques you can use. But yeah, it's definitely because of, like you're saying, a lot of this not thinking long term sometimes. So let's move on. This was a good one too, Leo. Ash, so for this business intervention, where are we going?
We are going to the ego-driven business. Now, does this symptom...
The internet just exploded with that one.
If you've been a victim of any one of these symptoms, you've dealt with an ego-driven business leader. So have you been micromanaged in your past? Has the person who's supposed to be your leader has a hard time delegating things, especially things they're not good at? They resist feedback when you're informing them, hey, you're probably not the strongest at this area. Maybe you could pass it off to someone who is. No, this is my business. And then maybe they even go as far as creating a toxic work environment, a toxic work culture, where everyone's just trying to make this person or this leader satisfied in some way, shape, or form. And for whatever reason, they can't seem to do it unless they do it in their own way, which is completely unnatural to their processes. It's like literally the my way or the highway culture. And it just destroys innovation completely. It's awful.
People are probably just having either flashbacks to that bad job that they had, or they're in that situation right now. And my heart goes out to you, because I know people who have like physically suffered from almost the emotional tolls of what goes on here. Ash, what I just mentioned one of the impacts there. Is that? I
mean, yeah, that's an awful one. I was going to say that the biggest one is one, it takes a toll, right? Yeah. And I mentioned one earlier, stifles innovation. You cannot innovate, and you end up losing talent at the same time, because people who are actually talented, they're tired of, when they realize that they're in a role now where they're just pleasing someone else and they're trying to get out of their own people-pleasing situation. They're like, okay, wait, hold on. Is this actually effective for the organization? Am I actually helping its growth? Or is me investing my time here with my talents essentially just feeding into someone else's ego? And once they determine that, they're like, oh, this is just an ego-driven business. Most top talented individuals will just jump ship, go find somewhere where they're like, okay, I'd rather work with someone who's more service-based, a leader who's a servant, than someone who's going to go ahead and we're only here to prop that person up, really,
It's not much different than the shareholder, except it's a shareholder of one. So what do you think is the root cause of this? Like,
what I really think it is, Tullio? Insecurity. I think it's someone who's had such awful trauma growing up, whether they had to prove themselves to a family member, a father, a mom, or parents, or so on and so forth, or they just didn't have the parents. They maybe were in a situation. I'm actually thinking of someone, as I'm describing this scenario, where because of these horrible experiences, they lived their entire life feeling they had to prove themselves. And when they actually did, right, they had some form of success, whether it was building a business or whatever it was, then they became that ego-driven business leader almost subconsciously.
I like Ash that you went there for the empathy for this person that's got the problem, because it's like this generational trauma somehow that that ends up infecting the employee culture and workplace, because of not just your boss, but really it's like their parents and probably even their parents at some point. And it's like, this is why I always say, hey, if you're a leader, you got to work on yourself, because
No, 100%. And
I've seen entire cultures
Yeah.
in this direction. It's like it's all about how you're looking and how you're perceived, and how whether you're ahead of everybody else. Like I've seen an entire group of a culture of people that get into this thing where it's like, following the Joneses sort of thing, right? It's sad. It's like what belt you wear, what brand shoes you wear, how much money you're making. It's all a status race for status. And it's like, why?
Like that insecurity when you have like multiple people with it, like multiple leadership with it, this becomes like the most toxic environment at work. This is when like all the politics and stuff coming at play, and where everyone's, afraid to say anything or do something wrong, and they're always looking for like a fall guy for something, so that is not them. And this is when you get, so when you have like multiple people with that sort of just insecurity, right, that this was when you get into those really weird dynamics where you're just like, this is awful,
absolutely. And they talk about bureaucracies that are developed that are no longer able to be fixed, and no one knows where they came from. They're like, just do away with it at this point. But they don't realize these deep-rooted issues that occur that at some point out, it's been so deep-rooted into the culture that and things haven't innovated, so there's no growth. People are wondering why things aren't getting done, why organizations failing. And they look back at the systems in place and they're like, wait, this is a culture that has stewed for so long that now it's become one with the culture. And to Tullio's point, people are so focused on status and saving their own butts that the lack of innovation is what that starts to cause the issues in the organization, why the growth doesn't occur anymore. It's one thing for people to show up and just not enjoy their jobs. That's another thing where the attention is so focused on just saving your job and keeping yourself safe, or pleasing a leader, or in the case of the leader, not being vulnerable and just protecting my ego, because if I show any weakness, then people are going to take advantage of me. Or maybe there was a time in my life where I felt I was vulnerable and I was beaten down, whether it was through a parent or whatever it was, the trauma that occurred. And now I have this fear of, if I just open my heart to other people, that I'm going to get hurt as well. Now the whole focus was that, not so much innovating.
We've talked about this a lot, and some of our guests bring this up too, is really that ability to have vulnerability with your employees. This is how you build connections and deeper connections with them, is that you're more human. You're not, you're not just some person out there who's just all about, me, all about what I want. It's like, hey, I've got some personal things I'd like to say. I'm a human, and they see you and you see them. And then you start having these connections. And when you have those connections, you start working better as a team, right? It's versus the opposite side of that, where it's just politics, and it's just, hey, I better not show that vulnerability because I will be eaten by the sharks, right? Or so it just becomes this toxic sort of problem. And like you said, and it's hard to get out of it, because it's now who's gonna be the person who can pull you out of that. I'm not gonna be the first one to go, because I think I just put the target on my back.
There's a tremendous lack of humility too. It's like,
absolutely,
there's no room for anyone in the room with that individual like that. Their head is so big, there's no room. You can't fit in the room with them. You can't fit in the building. There's no room for anybody else, right? Yeah. So there's no openness, there's no collaboration, there's no innovation, there's none of that. There's no growth opportunities, there's no ability to make an impact. You're just a cog in the wheel. And we've talked about this too in one of our earlier podcasts. They're so duplicitous in their lifestyle. It's exhausting. They're exhausted. The truth is, they're exhausted, whether they want to admit it or not. They're so exhausted living this way, because they're not like this in every aspect of their lives, right? There's an aspect where they're loving and kind and nice, right? But it's exhausting to be that way, because it's like constantly being on. I gotta look good. Yeah. It's not about running a good business. It's about looking good running a business. Yeah. It's just that.
Yeah. Like if you want to grow, I always say this, no matter, not just business, but in life, it's having that humility, because it just allows you to be open to things, open to new opportunities.
I think we should do a show just on this, on rehabbing, like a whole television show where we we rehab people out of this and walk them through the whole process. It will
How do
probably
we
take about a year per episode.
Yeah.
Ash, how do we rehab the ego-driven leader?
Yeah. So once that ego-driven leader is aware that he's ego-driven, hopefully this podcast helps him. You got to be able to promote humble leadership. You have to be able to embrace your humilities, embrace your vulnerability, encourage collaboration, and create a safe space for dissent and dialogue. But you have to also be bought into knowing that by doing so, this is actually good for your business. By opening the doors for dissent, you're allowing yourself to open the room for truth. It's not about whether or not you're right or that person's right. It's about getting to the truth of the matter, and that opens the doors for that. But again, it all starts with being aware first before you can promote that humble level of leadership and say, hey, we embrace vulnerability here. Share how you feel so that we can get to the place that we're all healthy and growing together, But that's the beginning. That's the beginning. You start awareness and then action after the fact.
So, yeah, Tullio,
I have one more rehab for this individual. And it's funny, it's reminding me of a guest we're going to have on the show real soon. We talked about this quite extensively, her and I. It's like, how do you help people break out of that? And I always say, go volunteer.
Yeah.
One of the quickest way to become more humble is go volunteer your time for something where you have nothing to gain. You have to do something. Don't give money. That's easy. Go volunteer your time to a cause that's not about you. And in time, you'll learn to be humble.
Yeah.
It's the only way. There's no other way to get out of that mindset, to break out of that ego mindset. You have to go outside of yourself and do something for someone else that's not about you.
Yeah.
And there's nothing better than volunteering to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think some really good tactics to stimulate that for people who aren't willing to go out there and do that themselves or do that volunteer. Let's just say you are the leader that went out there, you volunteered, now you have humility, but now how do you bring that into your organization? I think you can start drawing in EQ trainings into your organization. A lot of these programs, there's a few I've taken myself where they have these specific examples where they show you, hey, are you aware that put the shoe on the other foot? Are you aware of what that person's going through on the other side? I think, Tullio, there was a time where you showed us a really impactful video, and it was showing all the different perspectives of different people walking by who didn't know who they were, right? One person was going through this thing, this other person was going through that thing, and all of that was found in a training video, right? It was first off, hey, let's show that you should have perspective, right? And I think a lot of people aren't aware of that perspective. And there should be some training put in place for that to build on that emotional intelligence to say, hey, just because someone looks maybe hunky-dory over the phone, you have no idea what they're going through. Maybe they're just faking it to make it, right? Maybe they're having the hardest day of their lives and you're the most pleasant person on the phone for them to talk to and you haven't been that pleasant, right? So it's like all those things you have to think about. But that's how you could scale into your organization as one of the tactics, I think.
You're right. It's very multifaceted. Volunteering is one thing. It'll open you up, but then you still have therapy. Therapy helps. A lot of self-awareness. The more you become aware of yourself, the more you become aware of others. Like, for example, once you learn why you behave the way you do, you might learn why people respond a certain way because maybe they're going through some stuff too. They got their own traumas. But ultimately, it's learning to be empathetic.
Yeah.
I know this kind of leader a little too well.
Right.
I've been that guy,
And
so,
it's a whole shift of a paradigm shift of, hey, your employees aren't in service to you, you're in service to your employees.
Yeah.
And once you flip that, then it's just like, okay, so this is what I need to do.
Yeah.
Ash, you brought up that EQ training, and we had done that earlier this year because we have a great organization, and we're I was sitting in the meeting the whole time, and I'm just like, this could be brutal for some boss because it was very much like, hey, are you doing this, and this? I'm all, thank goodness we've got our act together on lot, because that would have been very uncomfortable for me on just how many ways that you could go wrong with this. So it's like, I think leaders, they need to do a little EQ training, like you said, and it's almost like it is like that intervention if they're all doing the EQ training together, because then the boss is there just like, oh, yeah, no, this is not good. I do this. I do this. So it becomes like that intervention almost.
Yeah.
But no, I was just like so happy that we had our act together going through that, because it would have been brutal. I could see for someone who's just very much in their ego and needs to shift from that to that service mindset as a leader. So
the benefit of leaders who invest in overcoming this, which is you hit the nail on the head, it's deeply rooted in insecurity, is tremendous freedom from those insecurities. That's when you are actually truly free, because you realize you can just be human.
Yeah.
And there's freedom in that, because these guys put tremendous pressure on themselves to just be perfect all the time. It's exhausting. It really is. So if you're struggling with this, the other side of it is peace in your mind.
Yes.
Peace.
Yeah, and you gotta trust your people can do things for you at a high level, right? And give them the encouragement that they can do that, instead of like that micromanaging. And that lack of trust is one of the hardest things for especially in our business, because you have to have confidence when you're in front of clients. You have to know what you're talking about. And if I was there like undermining that trust, it will come out. It will absolutely come out with the lack of confidence in there. So we're constantly trying to build that confidence with our employees, because look, you know what you're doing. You do. It's what's your mistake? It's not, you didn't lose someone in brain surgery today. It wasn't, you're not, on the high wire here where you're just, going to plummet to your death on the mistake. It's marketing, right? So
yeah,
I think that transitions into mine though, guys. So I want to bring up this dependence on consumer manipulation tactics that, we're in the marketing business. So businesses use these tactics to drive their sales, and, there's all kind of long-term damage this causes. But here's some of the things we're talking about. So like that fake scarcity thing, that you see, like there's only so many left, and, you come back later and it says the same thing, week after week. You're like, these guys don't seem that honest to me, after a while. So it's that long-term damage that's being caused there on that. It's not true. Or how about that like clock ticker that you see in marketing, where it's like this offer only lasts for the next, 3 hours or till midnight tonight. And then you come back, 2 days later and it's
still there.
Only lasts until midnight tonight.
My favorite are those businesses who have the going out of business sale 4 times a year.
Yeah. It's the rug store. It's like that rug store. That's like, hey, you ain't going out of business for 3 4
Again?
I'm on to you.
When I lived in New York City, they were always like someone was going out of business. It was like one of those carpet stores and all that on Lexington Avenue. And I was like, this same business there. I was there for 5 years. And I come out of the train and I see the same business, and they would have the going out of business sale 2-3 times a year. And I'm like, they're going out of business again. It was just a tactic to get the tourists to come in and spend money, because they thought we're going to get great deals. They're going out of business. Everything's on sale, even the fixtures.
Truly, you just reminded me of a memory that I think I pushed back in the deepest of my mind. Now,
sorry about that.
Knows my parents were Persian. They were one of those rug owner, antique furniture business owners. And now that I think about it, I now see what they were. So every so often, we would do a liquidation of everything, and then they would change their business name to something different. And I never
Exactly. That's totally a Persian thing, by the way.
Yeah.
Well, I guess like at RugCon or whatever you're going to, there's a class on this. Like Marketing 101 is the going out of business sale. Here's how to do it.
Are you struggling? Go out of business. Start
Liquidation sale. Everything must go.
Yeah.
It's killing me.
All right. So what are the symptoms of this manipulation tactics, Stephen?
So we talked about, I think, some of this here. I'm stuck on this rug one.
Well, honestly, on that note, so it's like the fake scarcity, we have
Big
hidden.
scarcity, yes.
We talked about hidden fees already. Really, ultimately, what
Hidden
is the
fees.
like? What
We haven't talked about hidden fees. Yeah.
What is the damage?
What's the price? Can I just get a price?
I got to tell you about this one. I planned a trip, and all of a sudden I see this amazing rent-to-call deal. I'm like, wow, that's really cheap. Yeah. And I book it, and I'm like, and then afterwards I'm like, okay, who's this company? I look this company. I'm like, I never heard of this company. So I'm like, this company name, and then reviews, and I'm like, they're a scam. They charge you for cleaning. They charge you. I'm like, oh, so they give you a really low price, and then they just gouge you for everything. And I'm like, canceling this reservation. Talk about hidden fees. Like someone came in with their carpet needed to be vacuumed, and they charged them $200 to have their carpet vacuumed. It was like a la carte. You get the car, but everything else you get charged for, cleaning it.
What's this fee on here? It says gouge fee.
And then it's like, but you don't know until you show up there and it's late. You got off a flight, and you're like, what do I do now? There's no cars available, and you just get stuck with it.
Yeah.
So there's probably 1,000 of these that just drive me nuts. Where, I mean, we'll get to more detail on this, but so the impact here though is it's this lack of customer trust, right? So oftentimes these are going to be like one and done sales or something like that. Yeah. And these aren't going to be the guys that you're going to recommend your friend to either. So you're going to lose that. And you're not going to have any ambassadors for your business. It's just going to have major brand damage. Yeah, that's why you change the business name. But then maybe even legal repercussions depending on just how crazy you take some of this. So yeah, I think those are some of the main impacts. And again, you get kind of the short-term mindset there, Tullio, and just trying to make profit, and you don't realize, hey, I'm never shopping at that store again, or I'm never telling my friends about this. You lose this whole opportunity to market to audience. No,
absolutely. I'm seeing a full circle come here now. What is the root causes, Tullio? I think you're gonna nail this one on the head. What is the root causes? I think this is when we think about when all this coming back full circle.
For this one,
I know this is a question for Steve, really, but I think when I look at the full circle root cause of this, I think
back to the short-term mindset.
Yeah, short-term mindset. What's talking about?
So I need you to dunk that one, Tullio.
I don't care. All the people that see me here, eventually they'll recognize that this was all fake.
Yeah,
I just need to get my sale now.
Yep.
So you've got that short-term mindset as the root cause. There's also the lack of authenticity. I'm just going to the lack of authenticity and how that's just going to affect everything from the business,
I think also there's a lack of confidence in your own self a little bit, right? I mean, it's like, don't you believe you have a decent enough product that you don't have to do all this stuff? Maybe put the energy to actually creating value that's sustainable instead of coming up with these ridiculous tactics. Like I often think like the energy being put into scamming people, basically that's what this is, right? Could be put into something useful.
Do something you believe in. Find something you believe in. Or if you've got a product, there's probably a way you can believe in that product in some way, that it's a solution for someone that has some kind of need. And there's probably a higher purpose that you're helping here. And instead of just, whatever scam you've got going, just to, hit your daily mark or your commissions for this paycheck and whatever other short-term.
So how can we help these folks rehab? What's the rehab strategy for these folks?
Yeah, that's a good one. A few things here. So I think obviously, some people you're going to need to promote some sort of ethical marketing practices, like, hey, this is not good. Transparency is always good. I always love a company that's very, very transparent with you. And I mean, you just build this connection, right? This trust in there because of that. And now this is a company that that I'm going to recommend my friends because, they're very transparent in everything they do. So we want to focus on transparency, whatever that means to you in your business. That's going to be a huge one. Focus on the value you do provide. So if that's content you're providing, focus on some value-driven content around your product, your service. Build long-term relationships. We've been talking about that really with Tullio's, and with this one in marketing, it's like focusing on that long-term relationship. So, maybe you can enroll your teams in some sort of ethical marketing programs or something. If you've really got a problem there, you need to shake loose. That might be something. I think a big one is going to be also finding that higher purpose in your business. And we talk about this a lot. So really, when you find that higher purpose in your business, the greater good you do or something like that, and you really identify that, and then you start speaking to that in your business. You start reorienting your processes, your systems towards your higher purpose more and more. So that'll help you with, introducing any sort of guidelines and practices, and it'll help you just get everyone rowing in the same direction. And so not having that higher purpose, I think, is just a really big problem for a lot of businesses, a lot of small businesses, especially. They haven't really thought about it. Big businesses, we see that higher purpose is that shareholder value thing only that Tullio talked about. So you have problems there. So I think really focusing on what is my higher purpose in. And for that, we've talked about this on the past. Our product that we're getting really close to releasing, the AI Chief Marketing Officer, one of the first things you do when you go in there is you go to this purpose crafter, where it's just going to ask you a series of questions. And if you don't know the answers to some of them, it'll actually automate some answers that are really helpful, that are pretty close to probably what you're going to say. And it gets you through this process really painlessly. And then it'll ask some follow-up questions. And then what comes back is we're giving you, hey, here's some purpose statements. Here's a whole bunch based on conscious capitalism. Here's a whole bunch based on best practices from various agencies. And we got a few other ways to show you these different purposes to your business. So then what happens from that is we take that and we apply it to all the marketing in there. So I think that's going to help solve some of the problems. It's not going to, push you to some of these toxic, addictive habits of, when's my next going out of business sale that I can run.
I also think a lot of these habits of learned, right? So
absolutely,
spend time with different people, like get out of the circles,
too, right?
Yeah, get out of the circles that are getting you into these habits. Like change your circle of people you spend time with, because they're all, these bad habits are learned, but the good habits can be learned too. Like, get a coach, get a mentor, use AI to help you validate ideas. I mean, you're going to have to change who you spend time with as well, I think.
Yeah, another intervention here that you're going to have to help break people from this toxic habit. So we're going to dive into more of these toxic addictions that are affecting your business on the next couple of shows with Tullio, Ash, and myself. We're going to cover the hypergrowth addiction, dependency on old systems and practices. This is a good one. This one's a hard addiction to shake for some people. We're going to talk about the metrics that matter. And then another one episode after that, we've got dependency on the traditional hierarchies. So this is something we've talked about a lot. And this is something where if you're talking about higher conscious business, they start to shift how organizations are actually just built instead of that, sort of traditional hierarchy. So that'll be a good one. We're going to get into the chronic undervaluing of employee well-being. This is a major chronic issue. And we're going to get into the lack of multi-stakeholder approach to running your business. So that's going to be our next couple shows with him. If you've got any topics or questions you want us to cover, those are the ones we're going to cover, but feel free to ask us some questions, throw them our way. We'll definitely look into them. So guys, great show today. Great discussion. Thank you for listeners for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you on the next Bliss Business Podcast.